This video is a recording of a live event, about an hour and 15-minute webinar, and it's really packed with all sorts of energy healings and information and explorations into the fine abstract layers of creation. I hope you love it. If you do, please like and subscribe. What is energy healing for about 2 minutes or 1 minute, and then 3 minutes of silence, and then introducing the topic and a little review of yesterday's session, and then on to even greater horizons. So we're going to do that. We do have a lot of new people with us now, so I want to make sure that it's clear what energy healing is. Energy healing is a technology of consciousness, basically. We focus attention. Attention is wholeness. Attention is that stuff of which the source of creation is comprised. Yeah, it's that piece of source energy that we have control over. So, oh yeah, prayer of gratitude, thank you. And also we'll do the prayer of gratitude. It's good to remind me these things. All right, so yeah. Attention is powerful. It's very powerful. It's very powerful. We all know attention is powerful. We all know this. Part of the challenge is getting the attention into the actual real source, the actual seed of the problem, because your attention is powerful, but if it's directed in the wrong place, if it's too much on the surface, then it doesn't carry the effect. It doesn't produce the effect that we want. It doesn't carry the power. We have to, part of the story is the attention slides down into the source of creation, because the source of creation, the ultimate source, even though it is source material, it like folds back into its own nature. And the value of that is gaining access to infinite resource. And resource is an important player in the healing process, because essentially what's going on when things go wrong is that they've gotten off track, they've gotten out of alignment with natural law, and they've got a little momentum behind them getting off track, like it's wrong and it's getting worse, something like that. And so it's going to, anytime you've got something going off track, it's going to take a little bit of some energy going in another different direction to pull it back into track again. So part of the story is using awareness and using the fact that awareness, anytime I look over here, guys, it's because my camera went out of alignment, using awareness to get to basically feed itself, to basically self-sustain. And it does that by taking recourse to the source of its own nature. So that's part of the story, is that awareness in the energy healing process, there's this process of awareness, like a deep sea diver, diving into the source of creation and coming out again, because every time we dive in, we get access to all that infinite resource that fuels the manifestation of the universe. That's a big resource. May as well leverage it. So that's part of the story, is getting into the source of creation. The other part of the story, of course, is getting right into the seed or cause of the imbalance. And I talked about that fairly extensively yesterday, but pretty much all imbalances can be found if we go back to their root, and the root of the root, and the root of the root, and the root of the deepest root. We can get back to a level where wholeness, where one becomes many. That point where one breaks from being one and starts to become the many. And we could say the one never really breaks from being one, it's always one, but there's a little shift where it goes from being folded into the nature of its oneness to unfolding or blossoming into the nature of the infinite diversity of the universe. And so there's a junction point there. And it's in that junction point where this idea of separation starts. And we worked, and I guess I'm doing a little bit review of yesterday too, but we worked with this, did some healing for this junction point, because just feeling into it, that breaking of the supersymmetry of wholeness is essential, but the loss of the loss of the integration of the experience of oneness is not, that doesn't have to go along with the breaking. It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. And I think this is where we're switching gears a little bit from our ancestors and from our predecessors. So we did some healing yesterday for that, to soften that transition between the one in its fullness and then the one wholeness and then the one appearing as many, right there at that transition, so that it's smooth and so that one is not lost even though many are perceived. All right. So we go to the root. We go to the root of the problem. And as we go on, we'll see almost every problem can be traced back to that single root, which is good. It makes it easy, right? And we'll talk more about yesterday's session in just a minute. That's basically the gist of what is energy healing. We want to focus attention in an intelligent and concise manner in order to most effectively use the infinite power, the infinite resource of consciousness to affect changes, or to, I would say, support healing and evolutionary transformation, and the ultimate goal of that process, which is divine embodiment at the surface. So it all sounds nice, but in practice, the reason we have these webinars is so that we put it into practice. So the webinars are these strokes of experience and understanding. We do it, and then we talk about, we understand what we did, and then we do it, and then we understand what we did. And when we go back and forth like that time after time, it starts to integrate. It really integrates, and life gets better. Health gets better, life gets better. It gets easier to live in a state of miracles, if we want to call it that. Although when we understand it from a level of experience and understanding, it stops being a miracle, and it's just the way we function. It's not like a surprise thing. It's just like the internet. 100 years ago, if you showed people the internet, they would think it was a miracle. But now it's just technology. This is just technology. So when we do it together in a group, as in these live webinars, it's very exciting because we have a big resource of attention behind, right? Like each of us is putting our attention. So it's like many flashlights with big lumens coming in. And that's also, that gives, it's like fertilizer on the plant or extra engines on the airplane. It adds a whole nother sequence of richness or value to the work that we do. So we get to see it through our perspective, our attention. We get to see it through each other's attention or perspective as well. And this is such a beautiful gift. So thank you everybody for being with me. I see a bunch of questions have come in. I did a lot of theory yesterday, but today I would like to spend as much time as I can on everybody's questions, because after all, I like to honor the questions. I love that you're so engaged and you're interested and you're asking such in-depth, amazing. It helps me focus my attention in a direction that you are interested in. And that's really important. We want to go in those directions. I want to do that. So, okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to dive into the field of absolute silence, because that's the resource, right? That's the attention folds back into the source of creation. So we're just going to take a few minutes as a collective, as a group, to do that. I will ask you to close your eyes. At the end of 3 minutes, I will ask you to open the eyes. Please don't come out too quickly, because one of the things that we're doing here is we're integrating this power. We're integrating it. So that means we don't come out too fast. We slow it down, just like we did in that gap between the unmanifest and the manifest, right? We slow it down so that we appreciate the nuanced ownership. We owning it. We own the experience. All right. I'm looking at the clock. Let's close our eyes. All right, let's take a minute and then slowly open the eyes. We're going to go into the prayer. Thank you to the source of creation for being everything, for being all of us and all of our ancestors and all of our descendants, for being the family lineages that link us all together. Thank you to the eternal tradition of wisdom that acts as a bridge between the unmanifest absolute and the manifest relative. With all gratitude for our ability to work concisely and efficiently, always going to the seed of the imbalance and addressing that in the most efficient and profound way. It is my hope that today's webinar meets and exceeds everyone's wishes and desires and visions for what we can accomplish together during this hour. And also, I am so grateful to be here with all of you. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be the voice of this healing collective. I appreciate it so much. All right. It's nice to have the silence. All right, so topic, energy healing for systems. And I made a list, it's around here somewhere. I made a list of all the systems, oh, here it is. A bunch of different systems of the body. And I thought, oh, we'll go through all the physical systems of the body on Friday, and then we'll talk about other systems like social systems and political systems and stuff on Saturday. Nope. We only got through about 2 or 3. We just kind of touched on 2 or 3 physical systems yesterday. So we need to stay with the physical systems, I think, to do it, to honor that. Yesterday's talk, a question came in that was a response to it started out with me doing some theory, and then we went into the system. So there's a question that came up in response to the theory part that I talked about at the beginning. And I would just like to go ahead and start with this question because it's a really great, really in-depth question. And it will give us a launching point, not only to review a little bit of yesterday's session, but also to dive even more deeply into the topic. So one of the points that I brought out last night was this principle, and anyway, he spells it out nicely, so I'll just read you. You talked last night about how Rishi directs the process, Devata is the process, and Chandas is the result, and that the result folds back to pure potential. What is the process of folding back? Oh, what a great question. What is the process of folding back? Is it done by the senses of perception, or is something else at work? I love this, and there are 2 other absolutely awesome questions, but we'll just start with this. So I mentioned that every system of the body reflects a sort of eternal patterning in our universe, and that is that the wholeness, the one unmanifest source of creation, emerges from its cocoon, we could say, emerges from being in its sort of inward state of folding to a more outward state of it blossoms forth, and it rises up, and it eventually expresses itself completely at the surface of creation. And then there's a point where it starts to deteriorate back and fold back into its own nature. And this happens literally everywhere with everything. Like we use the respiratory system as an example, right? You breathe in, you breathe out, you breathe in, you breathe out. It's an outward stroke and an inward stroke, right? But there are, through the pulsations of the blood, through the circulatory system, and the pulsations of electromagnetic energy through the nervous system, and the way the food, it starts here and it goes through this process and eventually we eliminate. I mean, it's just every single system does this thing, even senses of perception, right? Because the flow of awareness comes out through the senses of perception, and it falls upon our world, and then it falls back into it, and then we analyze and synthesize that experience. So no matter how you look at it, every system does this. Every system does it. The mechanics are that there's another, I already, in the question we used these Vedic terms, and everybody who's new should know that I have drawn upon knowledge, ancient knowledge, in order to define the work that I do. And the reason is that the ancients had figured out a lot of things that in our modern era we have forgotten. So part of the story is that we're drawing on this ancient body of Vedic knowledge. And I just do it, anyway, just automatically, because of having been exposed to it since I was about 15 years old. So it just sort of happens second nature for me to do that. But these terms, Rishi, Devata, and Chandas, essentially represent knower, known, and process of knowing. But there are three other values that actually come into play when the creation begins to emerge and then it dissolves back again. And these three elements are in every point in creation, not just in the systems of the physical body, but literally in everything that exists. And that is, these are the three gunas. And sorry, you can't find a post on three gunas on my website yet on the knowledge base, but it will be going up. I've already written it. I just need to get it up there. Three gunas are sattva, rajas, and tamas. And these ancient words don't exactly translate into English words concisely, but they're close enough. We can say sattva is that sort of pure energy that's associated with the emergence of the light of being from its source, the springtime and the growth and building up, life supporting kind of quality. And then rajas is, when I think of rajas, like energetically, it kind of feels like this. It feels like that to me, just kind of like this, like kind of driving sort of energy, but it's essentially the energy that sustains. It's just, or it perpetuates. We could say perpetuates and sustains. So sattva is that purity that comes forth, but then the rajas kind of helps sustain it. And then the tamas, the tamasic energy, is like a deteriorating, it feels more dense and it causes deconstruction. And, if we think of how like materials deteriorate like that, sort of, and it's kind of related a little bit to the digestive process, because we're breaking down in the digestive process, we're breaking the food down like that. So, and it eventually brings that back. So in the, and of course, the man who asked this question, I think he knows this. I think maybe we've already covered this to some degree, but for the new people, it's good to set up the foundation, anyway, the context, which is that at the emergence from the source of creation, you get mostly sattva, mostly purity energy coming forth with a little bit of that sustaining energy going. And as it gets to about halfway towards its full expression, the purity starts to become less than 50%, and the sustaining takes over. So it's more sustaining energy, but still with purity as we go toward the peak or the full expression of that impulse that came from the source of creation. Then when you get to the very top, there's a very important transition point right there where the sustaining energy is maximum. It's at its fullest value. So the purity energy is at its fullest value, just fresh out from the gate, okay? Purity is its maximum. Then the sustaining is at its maximum when the form has reached its full expression and realized potential. And then right at that point, this transition occurs where the purity energy starts to wane. It wanes back to nothing, and the deteriorating energy takes over in a very, very small quantity, but enough to like turn the tide and to bring that which was more in an expanding mode to start to turn it into more of a deteriorating mode. And of course, the tamasic energy is at maximum just before the process slides into the source of creation. So from my perception, to answer the question, this process, this folding back onto the self, is actually administrated by the three gunas. And it's administrated, and it's interesting because we think of awareness diving back into the source of creation as a very pure thing. It's like it's a sacred thing. It's a spiritual thing. You know, that going out toward the field of life is kind of like, you know, the relative and lost in the details and the boundaries and limitations of creation. And then that when we decide, oh no, I'm going to be on a spiritual, I'm going to march my awareness back into the source, that this is, there's a purity that's there, that's present with that. And maybe that's why it's said that the three gunas are present at every point in creation. Oh, it brings up some very, very interesting thoughts from my end, that because it ties into another question someone asked about pain. Let's see, what was that? Like if there was, oh, it's up here, I think. Yes, the first question that's up here on my question answer thing is good at the questions start to tie together. See, it shows how integrated you guys are. Because your questions are dovetailing, right? Can we ask the physical system intelligences, in other words, the devata of the body? Thank you for saying it so accessibly for those who aren't familiar with the Sanskrit terms. Devata are the intelligences of the body, right? If there are any behaviors we could adopt that would help them before they need to show pain to get our attention. So pain is absolutely associated with that going away from what we've created. Like when we start to create, there's an investment and there's there's momentum behind that creation process. And then when it starts to fall down and deteriorate and fall apart, it's very common that pain is associated with that. And we've done in the past a lot of healings for our ancestors. You can go back and review on my previous uploads for supporting that transition point, because that's a point where where fear tends to get stuck right in that spot, because all of a sudden it's like I understand what's happening. Life is growing and moving forward and progress is being made. Then all of a sudden it switches and it's like, oh, wait a minute. It's not the progress. It's not what I was expecting. And fear of the future and fear of the unknown and like that. So those ancestral patterns are being cleared once again, but this time in association with ego or sense of self, like identifying with energy of deterioration. You are so much bigger than the three gunas. We are all so much bigger than the three gunas. So their principles are like laws of nature that are just functioning. And they're sort of like, they don't have like an emotional investment. They just are. And I'm also noticing fear clearing from the solar plexus. So that's very good. That's very good. Very good. That power. And we've talked a lot about how situations and circumstances that arise that are difficult or challenging are also beautiful opportunities. And as far as review from yesterday, everybody should know that we did a very big healing to support the autonomic nervous system, processing all experiences from the context of opportunity rather than threat. And that's very much essential for, as we move forward, for the way we handle stuff, the way we handle everything, whether experiences build us up or break us down. Even the worst of them, It's okay. Anyway, everybody will get the recording from yesterday, so no worries there. Yeah, but coming back to this, that I'm thinking that the principle here of what needs to be done to support the experience of seeing a problem and analyzing effectively, and then being able to move directly from there into solution mode, rather than getting caught in decisions or behaviors or processes that give rise to pain. That's about the balance of the three gunas as the cycle begins to deteriorate. It's all starting to make sense to me. Oh, it's making so much sense to me right now. Okay, so if we start out, the seed starts to emerge from the source of creation. And as the seed of intention grows and starts to become more manifest, the purity element becomes less and less and less and less and less. So you could say purity is at its maximum at the emergence from the source, and then it becomes less and less and less all the way down, but it's still present. It's still present, but it's becoming less and less, and then it's zero. Purity value, the sattva, is zero just before the wave flops into the absolute. What causes that purity to become less as the intention manifests? It's the tamas. It's the deteriorating energy that starts in a very, very tiniest quantity just at the emergence from source. And then it becomes more and 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 more. And then just before everything flops back in, the material expression flops back into the unmanifest, that tamasic energy is at maximum. Now, this does two things. It's a slightly different model than I've been looking at before. And I thank you, all of you, because it's under the light of our lumens. It's under the light of our big collective awareness that these types of deeper, more complete, more precise understandings of the way these mechanics work emerges. So I thank you. For me, it's new knowledge. Maybe some of you already knew. I don't know. But anyway, thank you. I appreciate. It means that the tamasic energy is the energy that draws us back to source. And up till now, if we think of it as like purity, sustaining, and then kind of like a darker energy, like a deteriorating energy, then there's a tendency to make associations with that's like bad energy, right? But it's not bad. It just brings us back to source. It's not bad. And this ties in beautifully to the healing we did yesterday that was in this area, right? Because that was also related to the idea of not letting judgment come into play, because judgment is starting to decide, well, this one's good and that one's bad. But that the autonomic nervous system works way better if the judgment doesn't come into play at all. So what we were doing there was we were really clearing that in a sort of very visceral manner, all the patterns and habits and belief systems and all the, around judgments, like a big sort of structure, like a big internal structure can build up around things like, so there are justifications for judgments and so much. So what's happening right now is actually an energetic review of that healing. And for those who weren't with me yesterday, you are also getting that healing now, but you can go back and review and hear the description. But I'm feeling a lot of shifting in both the central nervous system and the cord of light, and also from through the chakra system. I'm feeling a lot of changes, feeling a lot of energy moving up through the spine, up and out to the source of creation, expansive energy. Because what it means is that what this new understanding about the Gunas means, or for me, it's new anyway. I'm sure the ancients knew, they had the words for the Gunas, so I'm sure they knew. But what it means is that sattva is always present. There's always, unless we're in the absolute where it's completely qualityless without definition at all, sattva can be found even in the most tamasic situations, even in the most deteriorated conditions. Sattva can be found. I can feel everyone's God presence looking at this thing. It's like a new toy. I know a lot of people are raising their hands down. I got a little thing that shows me when you raise your hands. It's like a new toy. It's like, okay, so sattva is present always at like every point. Is it possible that I can restructure the orientation of my flow of attention, right? Because that's what energy healing is. It's a technology of how we flow our attention. Can I do that in such a way that I never lose sight of the sattva? That even if there's just a tiny little thread of sattva in there, just a little tiny thread of purity, that's okay. That's enough. That's enough. I can find that. I can find that thread, and I can recognize it as a living expression of wholeness or totality. Because as I was describing that, of how sattva is most when it first emerges, and then it's least when it comes back to source, then I was like checking into that element of pure potential, which comes up in the next question here. And that is that when we look at that para Brahman, which we talked about yesterday, that quality of neither created nor uncreated, neither existent nor non-existent, beyond. Brahman is totality, and para Brahman is beyond totality. That quality. That quality, as I pointed out from my picture here, is like just like the brightest light. It is so bright. It is pure brightest. Oh, just like Vishnu. Okay, sorry. Some of you might have got that reference. Okay, so anyway, Vishnu has a little disc. He has a little disc on the end of his finger that looks like a light. So, all right, okay, I'm having fun. Too much fun. Let's go to the next question. In chapter 18, verse 14 of the Bhagavad Gita, 5 components are enumerated as the determinants of success in an action. Anishtana, which means standing upon, the basis. Karta, the actor. Various karana, acts of making. Various chestas, moving the limbs, activity, effort, sometimes translated as the energies. And daivam, relating to the devas, often considered as providence or the influence of the environment. Can this understanding expand the analysis of systems beyond Rishi, Devata, and Chandas? I would say yes, absolutely, absolutely. We could think of it as a 5-fold enumeration of that 3-fold structure, and I think that's how creation begins. We're talking fine mechanics of manifestation, right? So it begins. As the first emergence comes out, it's a 3. There's a 3 in 1 initial emergence from source, and then the next level, I believe, is a 5. So that would make sense. And we can kind of see some correlations, right? Standing upon, or the basis, and the actor are both representing the doer, the knower, and then the various acts of making and moving the limbs around is like the process, the devata. And then it says the daivam also relates to the devas, is considered providence or influence. And then of course, so those 3 would be more like devata. And then there would be chandas, which would be the result. The chandas is the result. Yeah, it's very interesting, but you know, there's so much power and beauty in the Sanskrit language that I appreciate the question, just getting a chance to speak out the words. And I think there's more that could be elaborated, but we do have a lot of questions to go through. And I see we're already, can you believe it, half an hour into today's session. So let's keep flowing. We'll go to the last question here. It is said that everything that can exist or has existed resides in virtual form as a kind of memory. What is the relation and dynamics that exist between what is experienced and these memories? And I really appreciate the question, because, you know, I understand it experientially, and I really would love for everyone here to understand it experientially as well. That which is beyond everything, that para Brahman, that is where those memories originate. And I was thinking, well, if you've got sattva, rajas, and tamas, one that we like as humans, we kind of like that growing phase, and then one that we don't like, where it's all falling down. But the truth is that if all the seeds of everything that exists in the whole creation emerge from the source of creation, like there's nothing that exists that doesn't emerge from the source of creation, then that means even bad things have their roots somehow. And of course, as I said before, the roots of that are found in that process of separating, that when the one starts to become the many, it has to diversify, right? It has to appear as many, even though it's really only one. The truth is it's only one. And in the source of creation, all the potential for all the different forms exist. All the potential exists. And that starts out as your pure potential, your wholeness. Oh, I forgot to fix this one more thing. Sorry, technology break. Let's see if that works a little better. It's a little better. When I look at you, I don't want to just like look at myself. All right, that's better. So what's happening is there's a little bouncing of awareness along the skin between the manifest and unmanifest, that little spot where those laws of nature that are responsible for the one separating apart and appearing as many, those like separating laws of nature are right there. And what's happening is there's a bouncing, and it's bouncing rather quickly. They say that it's infinite speed that it bounces ultimately, but anyway, bouncing enough that it's supporting each aspect responsible for the separation process to have its flow into the source of creation. So that's very interesting, because what we just did, the healing we just did as a collective, was we activated and increased the quality of sattva and our ability to recognize and honor and appreciate the sattvic energy as even at the worst of situations, even at the point where something is completely basically gone. What's replying from the source of creation is the awareness of the tamas, the folding back into self quality, right at that moment of emergence when sattva is at its maximum. So right there, as the laws of nature come out and all the universe comes out, that energy that's responsible for the folding back and the honoring and recognizing and integrating wholeness is also present. That way, wholeness is never lost, no matter how diversified the creation becomes, no matter how expanded, no matter how different, how like far apart the ends of the spectrum is, the ends of the spectrums of all that is. I'm also noticing another healing for ego coming through right here, that our ego that we've talked about as a spectrum between individual sense of self versus universal sense of self, how those ends are looping together like the ends of a necklace. And they loop together in that uncreated aspect of creation that's beyond all of it. It's an integration is occurring right at the junction, and it's happening for ego. It's not just happening for your ego, for my ego, for our egos, but it's happening at a very, very fundamental level of the physiology, cellular, subcellular, molecular, like going in. So it's being supported at an ancestral level as well. And I'm feeling something like a sort of gathering of energies, and particularly ancestral energies. I didn't know I was going to be doing reproductive system, but this is actually healing for the reproductive system going on here, because it's addressing or supporting identification with peak experiences, the union of the three gunas, the union of those mechanics. Those are mechanical forms that allow the creation to come through. But this is for the ancestors. And there's like a really, really big healing and clearing for all sorts of discordant feelings and beliefs and attitudes and judgments, so much that's been associated with the whole reproductive process and cycle and sex when it's not for the sake of reproduction. And the fact that it's all taboo, that even discussing it is taboo. There's like a whole thing now. Of course, healthy boundaries always, right? It's good to have healthy boundaries in place. But the point is that this is a healing that's supporting and allowing a releasing of a lot of dissonance and pain and I would say kind of like extraneous baggage that we've inherited and carried over centuries and centuries in our physiologies. Because it has to be both. We have to be totally self-accepting and allowing and supporting and recognizing the sacredness and the divinity in sexuality, and at the same time, there have to be healthy boundaries. It's both. It's both. It goes so much beyond intellect. It's just physical. It's just integrating into the tissues, into the organs, into the whole system, into the whole system. We've been carrying extra baggage, and that manifests as inflammation. It can manifest in all kinds of ways that are very uncomfortable. Those little hard fibroid tumors women get on their uterus, because those are like little compact packages of anger and frustration and all the energy that comes around and is associated with the baggage, all the extra baggage we've been carrying. So it's releasing and releasing and releasing. And when it releases, when the imbalances release, what happens is they gather up and they go into the cord of light and they're flushed out. They go back to Mother Earth, because our cord of light connects us into the core of our earth. And of course, Earth is just brilliant. Our Earth is brilliant. She's like a great composter. She processes it all up. She sends it through the cycles, right? Cycles of manifestation. Each time purity rebuilds in some form that is life enhancing and life supporting. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you everyone for bearing with me through that. Very amazing. Very sweet. There's more, I'm sure, that can be said about that. I could probably do a whole webinar on like one on each system of the body, probably, easily. Let's look at some of these questions up here. Is this webinar a repeat of the one yesterday, or is it part 2? I would say part 2. I missed the one yesterday, signed up today. Yeah, so I'm trying to catch you up for anything you missed. Anyway, thank you for being with me so much. I really appreciate it. You're probably not taking questions yet, but when you do, is that similar to core wound? So core wound is kind of a new term for me, but I would say core, if I was going to interpret that word, and of course, this is one of the things that I mentioned yesterday, there isn't really a standard in the energy healing community at this time for a lot of terms that we use. And so different energy healers use terms differently, like even terms that are fairly standard, like astral body, causal body, different people mean different things when they say those words. And so core wound, but I would say the core wound absolutely sits, like maybe someone's core wound is associated for them personally, with, say, childhood abuse. And, you know, because it happens. I have clients, they're people who've had deep wounds from their early childhood, and it kind of goes back, and the feeling is, well, that's the core wound, you know, is that I was an innocent and vulnerable and small, and I didn't have the resources to defend myself, and I was exposed to adult individuals who are imbalanced and had real severe maybe mental health problems or something, and they did things that were wrong. They did things that were wrong. And as a result, I had this core wound. But deeper than that is this fundamental wound, which is when that wholeness starts to break forward, starts to break apart and become all this diverse universe, that there's a feeling like I've lost the wholeness. I lost the one. That the one is somehow lost in that process. And the reason we experience that, and I mentioned this yesterday, is because the nature of our human physiologies and senses of perception is that the material field is just a lot more obvious. It's just obvious. I mean, if your eyes are open, you're seeing stuff. Look, I got this cute little thing right here. Isn't that just, I love that. I use it all the time, by the way. We've got someone watching who gave that to me. Thank you. I appreciate it. I use it all the time. But you see what I'm saying? It's like things like this world, the world, is what our senses of perception are just geared to perceive. However, the one is subtle, it's abstract, it's not easily perceived through the gross senses, but it is expressed as everything. So it's here, but it's like hidden inside the beauty or the interest of this world. This is a Venus thing. This is a Venus thing. So right now there's a shift right now taking place between our heart chakra centers and the planet Venus. She's kind of like the master of illusion, the illusion of the relative. And she's also the advisor to the destructive laws of nature, the tamasic energies of the asuras, known as asuras. So, but beautiful, but Venus is beautiful. And without Venus, there's no beauty and there's no fun. But life is no fun without that Venus energy. So we got to have it, man. I'm feeling energy rising up from the root chakra and from the whole sort of restructured reproductive area of the physiology, rising up in a kind of homage or appreciation or gratitude wave to the planet Venus and to that aspect of our cosmic reality, which represents that value. And then through that back to the source of creation. So that's happening. It's rising up through the body like that, up through the body. I wanted to mention today, which I didn't yesterday, but it needs to be elaborated slightly, is that part of what we're doing, we did do a little healing for it yesterday, but part of what we're doing in these sessions, and henceforth in all our sessions, is we are integrating our ability to draw upon the cosmic resource, which is our nature. So think of us as my fingers, and each finger is separate from the other finger. So each finger feels like they're their own unique being. But this is what our bodies are. Our bodies are like little fingers sticking off the surface of the earth. But the universe is the body. The universe is the body. And so we have within the field of our awareness or consciousness, as I talked about with ego. If you don't remember, you're not sure, check that out on the knowledge base, ego on the knowledge base, that our consciousness is completely capable of being fully in the finger or being in the whole body. And your consciousness right now is fully capable of being just in your individual body or spreading out and embracing the whole universe. The universe has a feel to it. We know that feel. That's why we like to watch Star Trek, right? The feel is in like every part of that TV show. I mentioned it yesterday, but I mention again because it's something. It's not something out there that's separate. It's like right here. You own it. You totally own it. All right. So the thing is that from the perspective of the pinky finger, say, the resource of the body, like all the blood and all the hormones and all the systems going on there, this is a big, big resource. It's a big resource. And it's owned. It's owned by the pinky finger. It's owned. You have access to it. This is important for energy healing because we have to understand that when we're drawing upon the infinite resource that's used to bring health to the body, we're really drawing upon our own universal body. That's supporting some clearing in the upper chakras, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and also in the head. It's the head and the brain. We did some healing for the nervous system yesterday. Hi, my love. Here's a message from London. In the map of the body mirrored by Mother Earth, where does Uluru sit? How can we, as powerful collective, help her reach her full potential? And how will that healing interact with our bodies? Big hugs. Okay. So Uluru is considered the sacral chakra of the, is it the sacral chakra? Oh, he sent me, the same guy who sends this, he sent me a, can you tell me, because I read the article, but it was like about 30 pages and I couldn't read all of it. I'm sorry. I just read part of it. But Uluru is considered one of the fundamental chakras of our earth. And one of the things that was interesting about the article was that Australia considers itself the first continent. And I think that's very interesting because there had to have been a first continent. There had to have been. And also the oldest molecules or the oldest elements on Earth have been found in Australia. So it's very likely. I think it's fairly well considered at this time by geologists, and so that Australia came first. So we grew from that center. And of Australia, Uluru, which is also known as Ayers Rock, for those of you who haven't heard the reference, is considered kind of like the heart or the center of it. It's considered like the most sacred part of the whole continent. So we could say that Uluru represents kind of like the first cell in the body, something like that. The original zygote, right? The original cell in the body. It all still is possessed still in the body. And of course, from the first cell and then the first collection of cells, the nervous system comes out. So yesterday we started out our session by doing a very extensive, rather like half-hour healing for the nervous system. It was really beautiful. Everybody shall receive the replay of yesterday tonight. My husband gets to work right after these sessions, God bless him. And he puts together the recording of today and yesterday, and then we send to you right away. So you have them while the weekend is still fairly fresh and you have time to listen to both. So everyone shall receive. I love you. I love you from Croatia. I love you. So one lady is saying, does this mean that at some point the expanding universe will make a turn back? I would say so. If you want my personal opinion, of course, that's hard to prove. You need some real heavy duty science to prove that one. But in my opinion, that is the cycle. It emerges from the Big Bang and it eventually returns. Yeah. There's a very interesting video on YouTube. If I can find it, could you please make a note of this? I will try to attach it. It's a rather short, but it's a really interesting video that shows what scientists predict the end of the universe would look like. It was very interesting. Very, very interesting. Kind of, oh my goodness. Okay. Can we do healing for bile stones? I have close family member have for years problems with it, especially in this time of year when food is heavy. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Let's go into the digestive system. And by the way, as I was looking at all these systems, I wrote down what I kind of thought were like basic systems, right? But then I realized, a lot of these systems are overlapping. Digestive system overlaps with skeletal system, for example, and also circulatory system. I actually lumped those three together. And I realized that the immune system overlaps with the integumentary system and so forth. They're all, which is your skin, right? That's kind of a system, but that also overlaps, is also considered kind of part of the immune system. And someone did ask a question about lymphatic, if we could do lymphatic too. So we should, I'd say, focus on digestive and immune at this point. So here's what I'm understanding. I'm looking deep into the gallbladder and I'm asking from the source of creation, asking into my source, like what's the story behind the gallstones and how they fit into the simple cycle that we understand. Wholeness emerges, it manifests, and then it goes back. Okay, how does it fit? Well, the thing with gallstones is that this area of our physiology, gallbladder particularly, represents our personal power. That's what the solar plexus chakra, that chakra that's right in the middle of the body. Why I'm not finding, I don't know, but anyway. And this is the area where we leverage our personal power, and this is the area where we leverage the nature of the destructive side of the cycle in order to promote an evolutionary effect. This is all the story. This is all the story in this area: liver, gallbladder, stomach, spleen, pancreas, kidneys, like this whole area. This is what it's about. Diaphragm. And what happens with the gallbladder is the imbalance that gives rise to the kidney stone, to the gallstones, is one of holding on to the aspects of that process where consciousness comes back to the source of creation, holding on to the aspects that are judged or deemed negative, that are seen as negative. When there's loss, when circumstances arise that are challenging or are like pushing you to, I'm talking, even though I know your relative isn't here, this is a question from Croatia. I know I'm just talking to that person anyway, even when you know that the circumstances have arisen that are so challenging, and they're like, nature will do this. It will bring you experiences that are just like a little stretch beyond your reach in order to support your ability to grow into your next phase of experience and evolution. But when the individual holds that sense of self that, well, I don't have the resources and I'm not, I don't, it's like the pinky. The pinky's like, but I don't have access to infinite resources. Well, you can't, if we try to take all the blood in the whole body and put it into the pinky, it would make the pinky feel sick, right? The pinky can't do it that way, but all the blood in the body does circulate through the pinky. It doesn't go all at once. It goes out some, like a lot of it goes into the heart. The heart's a bigger organ, but because the resources are not experienced as being completely held, because it would make, like I said, it would make the pinky sick. I just learned recently from a course I'm taking on geology that the core of Jupiter is gold. Isn't that amazing? But the thing is, there's a lot of gold on Jupiter, really cool. But like, we don't get it over here. It's in Jupiter. It's in this center of Jupiter. It's not over here on Earth, right? So the thing is that, yes, the resource is there. And yes, when you, and I'm going to use gaining wealth as a kind of example here, because I think it ties in, is that the reason we have wealth, the reason we want wealth, people desire wealth, is because we want the effects of wealth. We want life to reside on a level of dignity and comfort that's high enough that as individuals, we are able to reach our goals. We are able to fulfill our dharma. That's another Vedic term. You can look that one up, D-H-A-R-M-A, dharma, on the web, on the knowledge base, means that we're able to fulfill our station or our role in this creation. And even though we can't, like, at this point, human technology isn't good enough to send a rocket ship over to Jupiter and start mining the gold out of the heart of Jupiter, which would probably be bad for Jupiter anyway. But through our consciousness, we can embrace Jupiter. We can own Jupiter. That's, Jupiter is part of our own nature. And the resource, if we think of gold as a resource, that resource is available and accessible as a form of our own consciousness that can support our ability to live on a level of dignity and grace, providence, of resource that allows each one of us to live our full potential and to really embody divinity in this lifetime. The gold is in you. The gold is in you. It's your nature. So with gallbladder, the resources to meet difficult situations are within us. But when the belief is held that I don't have access to the resources, the situation is coming, I don't know what the lesson is, it just hurts, right? Like, we've all had that experience. The lesson's coming, it hurts. I got that part. I got that it hurts, right? Yes, we all experience that sometimes or sometime or another. But it doesn't come, it won't come, it wouldn't come to you unless you do have the resources. But to gain the resources to meet that experience, or to at least, extract what you're supposed to extract from it, one needs access to the source of creation, because that resource is a resource of wisdom. So dive into the source of creation. And what that does is it gives your autonomic nervous system a minute to rest. Now I'm talking to this relative. Gives it a minute to rest so that he can reset the autonomic nervous system. And that's the parasympathetic and sympathetic, so that they're functioning on a level of this is an opportunity rather than this is a threat. And that right there, that's the reason I spent so much time on that yesterday, is because this is literally, guys, for all of us, this is a key component. It's a key to stepping up to every experience that comes in a way that builds you up and rejuvenates you and makes you strong and expands your consciousness and integrates wholeness and stabilizes divine nature. Is this one thing? Is my autonomic nervous system responding to this as if it's a threat, or is it responding as if it's an opportunity? This one thing, it makes a big difference. And it's something we have control over. That's what's so beautiful about it. It's something you are in charge. You are the boss. I love you. Keep doing it. Anyway, go back and review that part of yesterday's session, because that's important. But this is what I say for the gallbladder. He won't be holding on he doesn't want to hurt people's feelings. Like, it's a sweet person. And he sees like things happen and it's not good. And the gut reaction is to respond by saying, hey, darn it, what the heck are you, what are you doing over there? Like you're trying to rip me off. You're trying to exploit me or whatever. And so instead of hurting people's feelings or whatever, he stuffs it and holds it and holds it and holds it. And the little seed core inside those gallstones, there's like a little piece that was the original piece. It's holding on to this discordant feeling. So we go in and we isolate that discordant feeling as an energy signature. Everybody who has any stones now or who will have any stones in the future, we find that. Oh, guess what? The seed is, I'm separated from wholeness, so I don't have the resources to deal with this. That's the seed. And ego is connected. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I am the source of creation. I am the source of creation. I am the source of creation comes in and sits on that seed. And just like the relationship between tamas and sattva, right? Like one is getting more and one is getting less. So they're always like balancing each other. The I am the source of creation. It goes there and it balances that thing. It's because it got out of balance and it had lost its connection to that other side, which is the I am the source of creation. So that's going in to that seed. In those organs, kidneys, liver, gallbladder. Kidneys, liver, gallbladder. And I'm just feeling the energy moving through those organs. It's just moving in grace, with grace. Whether in the present, whether in the future, it's okay, doesn't matter, whether in the past. It's balancing. All we're doing is we're creating wholeness. Why? Because awareness is an expression of the source of creation, which is wholeness. Health means wholeness. And so there was a piece and it had gotten separated from its partner, you could say. And so we just complete it. We just complete it. You can tell your relative, you can use the hand chakra. They can put the hand there. I am that source of creation. Thank you, reproductive system. You're welcome. Try to get to lymph system today. Yes, thank you. So I shall now look at lymph system. We are coming in on our home stretch here. So like I said, I could probably do a whole webinar on each single topic. But anyway, lymph system. Lymph system is actually part of the immune system. And the immune system, as I mentioned, it overlaps. Immune system it overlaps with endocrine because immune system is administrated through the thymus, which is a gland. So it's part of the immune system, right about where my pendant is right there. And the lymph system, of course, is responsible for carrying away toxins. So anything that carries away anything that carries away anything from the relative is going to be part of that deteriorating side of the cycle. You could say, well, the lymph system is also creating purity. But the thing is, the lymph system acts as like, it's like a workhorse. It's acting as the pockets, the little pockets where we put the things that we don't want. We put the stuff that we're done with. That's what goes to the lymphatic system. So the lymphatic system ends up being kind of like the garbage dump. It ends up being the trash can of the, if we think of the body like a house, the lymphatic system is, each room has a trash can or two in it. So it becomes that part of the system, of the physiology. And I would say probably most likely under recognized and appreciated. So first thing we're going to do is we're just going to focus our awareness, our great big powerful collective awareness on the lymphatic system. And the first thing that's happening is a recognition and appreciation of how vital the role is, what a vital role that system plays in the body, and how magical it is that the little tiny lymph nodes, they're so small, right? But they're able to take up that which we as a big human, as our whole big human body can't deal with. So that's pretty amazing. And that kind of ties in a little bit to the last issue we were talking about, where a problem or situation arises and we feel like we can't deal with it. And it feels as if there's a little bit of that same energy of, I can't deal with this. It's ever present. It sort of presents itself in the lymphatic system, because whatever's going there is something that either I can't deal with or I do not want to deal with it. And I shouldn't have to deal with it. We shouldn't have to have toxins in our system. So fair enough. But that I don't want to deal with this, I'm going to give it to you. Kind of like a little bit like scapegoating or something, a little bit there. We talked about scapegoating previous webinar series, webinar grouping. But now, instead of scapegoating, like, I don't want to deal with this, I'm giving it to you, you know, curse you. It's more like a value of reverence, respect, recognition, even a feeling of protection. These are the qualities that are being produced by the causal body as emotional structures that are able to flow from every part of the body where an imbalance resides that will eventually end up in the lymphatic system. That the channels are in the body, physical channels, but they're also energetic channels that are responsible, because along with those toxins, the toxins tend to represent or are present in the body as a byproduct usually of some other imbalance at a deeper level. So reverence, recognition, appreciation, and a sense of honoring or protecting, caring for, nurturing. So these are the qualities that are now settling into and completing the energy that was previously residing in the lymphatic system. And these energies are born in the context of that sacred space of the self, where we are healing ourselves. There's a sacred healing space. That's a term on my knowledge base if you want to check it out more deeply. But that's also kind of a fundamental of energy healing, is that we create a sacred healing space for ourselves. Because when we are, the more you do it, the better you get. And the more you do it and the better you get, the more you find yourself just living in that sacred healing space, but residing eternally in that space where you are safe and you are whole and you are well and you are protected, you are taken care of, you can trust, where you can trust this universe, right? So many of us feel like, I can't. we look out into the collective, and our big collective is doing what we're doing. It's dealing with problems that are just a hair beyond our reach, but we're doing it as a collective as well. And it can be quite unnerving. And this is why we do these energy healing webinars as well. Guys, I'm seeing there are 26 questions that came in here, and I haven't even reached all the questions here. Oh, and we're just coming up to the end. So let's see if we, okay, so one lady's mentioning, oh, let's see. Is there a point where we break off into many? Could that be the core wound? Yes, I would say where we break too many is the core wound, yes. And then one person saying she's getting the word teeth coming in. And yes, the teeth, there's a whole page on my knowledge base for teeth with healings. And folks, as I continue to go along, as you know, when we're working together, new knowledge is coming forward. So every time new knowledge comes forward, I try to upgrade everything, particularly the healings. Replays emailed, yes. Replays are emailed directly to your, no worries, directly to your email account. London is saying umbilical cord. It's kind of like a core spot. Oh, that's like a core spot. Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Now, I don't even know if the umbilical cord is one of the first parts to form in utero. Like, I should know that because I'm a mommy, but I don't know that one. So I think I have to look that one up. So one lady's saying that she's getting headaches. Usually headaches rise up when there's some trying or effort, when trying or effort moves into the process. So I would suggest no expectations, no effort, just simple listening quietly, simple listening, just being with it. It's the first time I've ever heard that. And one lady's saying that a leap of faith is needed. Yes, but it's easier if the leap of faith is, yes, I agree. But also part of what we're doing is we're aiming toward the stabilization of our relationship with pure truth so that there's a foundation for the faith and it's understood within the context. And each one of us is so good, so sweet. You know, the intention is always at the highest. Though, some love coming through. What about when a planet such as Jupiter is not in great dignity? Oh, such a good question. Yeah, so the thing is that that's the point where the part of you that's beyond all this material level of creation is most important to access, because we all have different relationships with the planets. They are our cosmic body, but everybody's relationship with the cosmic body is slightly different. It's definitely a system there. And like, I don't have like such a great relationship with Venus, just saying in my chart. And the way I handle that is that I always approach Venus or those aspects of my nature from the largest, most complete version of myself. Because if I try to address or access that energy from more of an individual level, it creates nothing but trouble. And I think this is also partly for the person who's feeling a little uncomfortable right now for the headache. That when we're approaching from the individual level where we experience a lot of the boundaries of this reality, and it also makes this reality more beautiful and interesting, meaningful and valuable. But at the same time, it also is constraining. And so that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing some constraining energy there in the head. So just allowing awareness to go more to the larger level of self. Yes, on the subject of digestion, what are your thoughts of excess weight on the physical body? Oh, I have a lot of thoughts about that. And I used to do whole webinars on weight loss, just saying. So those are available online. Love healing for this, if appropriate. Release that which is not needed. Body form, fat, stuck emotions, yes, etc. Physical body. Thank you for asking, because so dear to my heart. So much I love you. So much I love you. It's really... Here, the seed, the fat cells are little energy pockets. They're little storage units for energy, but they also store discordant feelings. So It's not just about the storage. It's not just about eliminating, which we've done. And I think even on recent webinars, we've done this, releasing the discordant feelings in the fat cells, but also the mechanism that causes the fat cells to store discordant feelings. This is why if we try to do some kind of dieting, it can work for like on the temporary, but then it can't be sustained over the long term. And what we really are looking for is sustained normal weight. Sustained, and that means maybe not so like, doesn't have to be super fast, but if it's consistent and if the default setting, and there's this here, we're talking default setting, we're talking about limbic system, where third ventricle of the brain, where the organs that regulate appetite, for example, reside there. This resetting this part of the brain, of the administration of the body, is it requires, I'm just holding space for it. There's a shift. The shift is happening. The shift is happening between solar plexus and heart area. They speak, the lower intelligences, or the intelligences in the torso speak to the intelligence of the brain to support the resetting of that system. And it definitely falls back into how do we deal with negativity. This is the kind of the underlying. And negativity is seen as, and in its core, negativity is when that one has to break apart and we lose the connection with the one. That's the fundamental of that negativity. So that's shifting. That's shifting, because we're now seeing it more as an opportunity. And I'd say the upgrade for the autonomic nervous system is going to be a major player for you, because when every experience is bliss, when every experience comes forward as an opportunity, it's a bliss. It's a bliss. And that bliss, that translates into the body. And instead of being stored in the body as fat, it's used by the body as energy, and it makes a huge difference. So for now, that's a short version. Need a leaf of faith in relationship to pinky to body. Yeah, where our body does Jupiter, where in our body does Jupiter reside, connect to, and what that it might mean. Ooh, so okay, to a brilliant questioner who asked that question, I would like to say, there's a book. I have this book. It's a heavy book, and it has in it charts of the heavens and the planets and their relationship to parts of the body. So you can check out this book. It's kind of expensive, even though it's a paperback. It's kind of expensive, but it's great. And if I can, I'll look that up and put that. Could you make a note that we'll add that also? I'll add that specific point where in the body, Jupiter. But Jupiter is about expansion, and that's actually fat. Jupiter is the fat in the body. But Jupiter is also precious, like really, really precious, because Jupiter is the most sattvic of the planets. Jupiter is that which expands knowledge, so forth. You've talked about Brahman, and you've spoken about Vishnu. I would love to hear what you say about Shiva. Oh, I have been very involved in Hindu teaching for a while. Well, you might know more than I do, because I just got it through osmosis, through just living in a community where it was kind of like Vedic science was just like part of everyday. It's not religious. It wasn't. I didn't get it within a religious context. Let's put it that way. I got it more within a context of like practical, sort of. I love that you resource the Vedas. Yeah, me too, man. Upanishads, Santana, Dharma, yes. And use them in healing. Yes, it feels so right, doesn't it? Because that ancient knowledge has survived because it's so close to the truth. Feels like they are the pure source of truth. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely beautiful. So Shiva is that flop back into source. So we can kind of make a sort of loose connection between sattva, rajas, and tamas, kind of, but really, this is where sattva, rajas, and tamas are all combined together, rolled up together, because these are called deva. For those of you who are not familiar, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva are devas. They're considered like the great overseeing. They're like animate. They're like animated forms of consciousness that are that represent functions in our reality. Functions in our reality. But Shiva is always going back into that deepest silence. That's the short version, because we're out of time. I'm already over time, but I'm hoping to get through the last couple questions. A longtime TM friend who died of cancer, and what's left of umbilical cord? Something energetic there, for sure, 9 years ago. Wow, the core of Jupiter is made of gold. Yeah, yeah, that came from a geological physicist, or what's his title? That guy that we're taking that course from, Tom. Anyway, yeah, that just came from science. Gold and Earth. They think that there's a lot of gold in the core of Earth too, because gold is so heavy. Evidently, it sinks to the center of the planet. Is that from your own perception or from us? No, that's from like scientists. Yeah. Yeah, feels that way too, but but that's the theory at the time, at this moment. In case you don't already know, remarkable solstice this year. Yes, right? Conjunction Jupiter, Saturn, explained. Yes, absolutely beautiful. That comes down, it's down to our last question there. Really sorry, I didn't get to the integumentary system today because I got a big download for it. So we just might have to do a revisit to this webinar on systems, because there's a lot more exquisite healing and power and goodness that can come out of that. And one of the reasons I haven't done specific webinars on specific systems is I know that for a lot of you guys out there, your challenges are in specific areas. So if I've got somebody with me on the webinar and their problem is their skin, then if I do a webinar on some other part, like say the skeletal system, it might feel like, no, that wasn't really what I was interested in. And because we have such a big group, I would like to keep the webinars general enough that that everything appeals to everyone. But I learned a lesson, guys, on today's webinar, because I realized that there's a lot we can do with each of the different systems of the body. So I'll think about that. We'll see what maybe we can take a collection of systems at a time, like skeletal, circulatory, digestive kind of work together. And yeah, immune goes nicely together with the integumentary and the circulatory. So we could do that because they do overlap. Oh, that's a good idea. So you got to catch circulatory from one angle, then catch it from another angle. That works for me. I like that idea. Okay, beautiful. Yeah, thank you. She's put a link there for the looking into the conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn for the solstice. And if you look up in the sky, you'll see something that looks like a really, really, really bright planet, because they're going to be right on top of each other. And then all their moons around the outside. It's going to be super cool. Let's hope it's a clear night. All right, everyone. Speaking of clear night, may today's webinar serve the purpose of helping to clarify for everyone what is what's really important, and what we really are. I'm so grateful to everyone for being with me. Beautiful. You all stayed with me to the end too. That was amazing. And I went so far over time. I'm so grateful I'm really grateful to all of you. And I'm really excited to see what comes up in January at our next session. And thank you everyone for being with me, and we shall continue. Bye. Have a lovely holiday season to those of you who are celebrating that. Wishing the best for everyone. Thank you.